We're here at American Top Team in Coconut Creek in South Florida, and one of the newest additions to American Top Team, Muay Thai, silver medalist
in the World Games.
Nili Block. Nili, thank you so much. Tell us about being in Birmingham, Alabama for the big Muay Thai World Games and competing in that competition.
So the World Games, it happens every 4 years, just like the Olympics. It's for non-Olympic sports. And so you have their lacrosse and American football, flag football, water ski, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, kickboxing. Any sport that is under the umbrella that's non-Olympic is most likely going to be there. It was supposed to happen last year due to COVID. That pushed off the Olympics, pushed off of that. And so it happened literally 2 weeks ago.
As a competitor, what was it like dealing with all that and then finally having those competition, having everything in Birmingham, Alabama, and having that big event?
So as a competitor for about, been training Muay Thai for almost 17 years already. I have competitions throughout the year, it could be 3-4 competitions. And unfortunately I had to go through ACL surgery. So that kind of, in addition to COVID, it pushed me off for like 2 years. I was not competing. And the World Games was my first competition since COVID, since the surgery, my recovery and everything. So it was a thrill for me to be back in the ring. I was just itching to get back in. And the silver medal wasn't the outcome that we were looking for, and yet everything that I went through, the past 2 years, for me it was a huge accomplishment, knowing that, okay, a bit more of training, things would have looked different. In addition to that, there was, I don't want to, badmouth right now, but there's so many things that went into it as well. For my coach, my personal coach, Benny Cogan, not being able to be in my corner. He was there as a spectator, but that will unravel as time goes on. If you want, we can expand on that.
I was just going to say, mentally as a fighter, when situations happen, whatever they are, that are different, how do you just deal with that then? And was it something that you knew ahead of time, or was it just something that happened?
What, the coach not being in my... So it's something we've been dealing already for a few years. The International Committee, the International Federation of IFMA banned him from the federation not to train or be in the corner of other fighters because of false evidence for whatever reason. Again, we can talk about this later. So I knew that from the beginning, and so we were able to train and do all of our preparations in according to that knowledge and that data. But I had his support from the beginning, and also the Israeli committee, Ayelet, which they were helping us as well. So we were able to kind of navigate ourselves through it.
And navigating through that, who then was in your corner for this big event?
So in my corner was Ronen Edelstein. He's another coach from Israel, as well as Itai Gilshon. He's another fighter. It was just kind of pulling strings together, They were phenomenal. They did their best, but it's not the same. When you don't have your coach, someone who knows you and trains you and knows every little detail for good and for bad, how successful can you be? You have a car and you have a driver, and the driver knows the car best. So when you change a driver, it's not going to be the same ride.
With all that, and dealing with all you had to deal with physically, just when you look back at it, how did it make you feel coming out of there and winning a medal?
So finishing the competition, finishing the fight in the finals, I had a lot of emotional
anxiety?
Not anxiety, but things just like going through my head of like, could I have done better? Or also the judges were kind of against me as well due to this whole situation with my coach. And so it wasn't only fighting inside the ring, it was fighting them and fighting all the politics on the outside. You would look at the fight and you say, how did round XYZ, number 1, 2, or 3, why wasn't it given to me? And so things and questions start arising. So yes, I was emotional because could I have done better? I deserved the win. After being all, through all this recovery and not being in the ring, and this is being, like, actually, I'm really proud that I was able to accomplish this medal, because it's not a given. After all of that, being still at the top, it's very hard.
I think just make it to the finals
Yeah.
was incredible, considering everything surrounding physically, politically, mentally, to be able to do that. I'm wondering physically, what happened with your ACL? Was it something that happened in training? Was it something that happened outside of training? And how do you deal with that mentally, going through that whole process?
So it was an injury that it was like a few different traumas. It was like kind of 1 and then 2 and then 3, so it kind of slashed it in the end. So it was during training, just small little angles that just weren't good for the knee, and it just caused the injury.
Was that the biggest injury you've ever had?
It was the biggest injury, yeah. You have some broken nose and toes and some other ligaments like the iliopsoas, but this was the biggest one that really, shut me down for a couple of years.
How do you deal with that?
It was very tough. In the beginning, you kind of question a lot of things. Will I be able to get back to where I was? You start comparing yourself to what you were to your other peers and your sparring partners, and they're continuing and they're getting better. A lot of things go through your mind, and one of the things that really helped me also was a book called Rebound, where they talk about athletes going through injuries, and having these questions. It's a part of your identity that's being taken away from you, and so who are you and who am I, and without that, and where do I go from here? So it's just things that I had to go through, and you just kind of pull yourself together, and it's also the people that surround you. My coach, the medical team that took care of me, that really held me together. It wasn't only me and myself.
When you're growing up in Israel and you're getting involved in sports, what sports did you participate in, and what was it like?
So growing up in Israel, I took part in many different sports. American flag football. I was even here in Miami with them for a competition. The world, I think it was the World Championships. I didn't really play. I was on the sidelines. I was an extra man. Basketball, soccer, little league, baseball, ballet when I was really young. I cycled competitively for 1 year. So I was really called an all-round athlete in that sense. And Muay Thai I was doing as well when I was 10. My mom took me. She was volunteering in the police department in Israel. And as a religious woman, so she was covered up to her toes and with a wig and to her elbow, because that's part of the religion. And so she was looking for some self-defense class for herself, as her volunteer work demanded it. So she found Benny Cogan in Jerusalem as a Muay Thai coach. She started going, and she dragged me along with her. Remember, it's me plus 5 other kids. We were 6 kids in the household. And it was just an outlet for me. It was an outlet from being on the streets and at home. Also my parents were going through a divorce. So it was the sport that really saved me.
And it's interesting because you mentioned all the sports, but really where you excelled the most and took to became Muay Thai. So what was it like for a young lady in Israel to train, participate, and then compete in Muay Thai?
So I'm going to take a few steps back. It wasn't only Muay Thai. It was only Muay Thai from the age of 17. Up until 17, again, I was doing like almost everything because my dream was to be an athlete. I just loved that life, that rigorous and tough, morning and evening. I just liked it. You come home all bruised up. You have no idea you have like turf in your shoes and your cleats. And so if you were to ask me at the age of 12 or 13, where do I see myself in 10 years? I would have said probably be on the national football team. But as years went on and I had to be drafted into the army, the question came up, am I gonna be a special athlete, or do I become a combat soldier, you know, with the gun and being in the field and protecting our country, because we still have, you know, a lot of problems there. But in the end of the day, I decided to go with the athletic career. And that was only at the age of 17 and a half. So only around that age did I actually compete internationally and left behind all the other sports. Which also makes sense because, you know, otherwise I can't be one discipline doing the other ones as well. But okay, so going back to the question as far as being a female, you know, and Israel and the religion and everything, it was not uncommon. Sorry, it was not uncommon.
It was uncommon.
It was uncommon, sorry.
Yes? No.
Right.
We'll figure this out.
So it was uncommon for a female religious girl to participate in almost any sport, I would say. So I remember going to school, you know, like in a skirt and everything, coming home, changing the pants, going to like the local basketball court and playing with the guys, playing with the boys. I was always looked at like funny or like even mocked sometimes, being called names. And I just kind of brushed it off. You know, I knew exactly who I was, what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be. And so I just continued, you know, on that path. And sometimes the school would also like kind of raise an eyebrow, you know, you shouldn't be doing that, but you are doing it. So like they were supportive, but they weren't supportive. So it was like kind of like mixed in that, going back and forth, I would say, especially in like high school years.
How do you deal with that?
It was just something like I was just in my mind. I'm a very
Focused?
also focused, but
driven? Strong?
Not strong. What's the word?
Determined?
I can't think of the word. Where someone doesn't change their mind so easily. Stubborn. I was just a very stubborn person, like for the good and for bad. I'll give you an example, like a small story from the house. My mom wanted me to wear this shirt. I was young. I was like maybe 9 or 8, something like that. She wanted me to wear a certain shirt, and I was like, no, I don't want to. And we were going out for ice cream, and she said, if you don't change your shirt, you're not coming with us. And little did I know, I stayed behind because I was just so stubborn that I wasn't going to wear that shirt that I didn't want to wear. And so, yeah, so good for bad, you know?
That stubborn, strong-willed, and determined. That's how I look at that. That's interesting. It's funny because, well, not funny, but just in an unusual sense, because living here in America, that part of it could have been you could have been drafted into the army and fight. So were there a lot of women that were drafted in the army in Israel?
So over the years, there were so many changes, how women are looked at and their abilities. In the beginning, women were drafted into, you know, very office work in the army. By the way, that's what I did as a special athlete. As years went on, you know, women wanted to be out in combat and wanted to be out in the fields, and so they were able to really make that change. And you know, you see more female women, so you see more females out in the fields with the gun, protecting, doing exactly what the men do. That's, you know, again, we're talking about also 15 years ago, and when I started martial arts, it wasn't, you know, it just wasn't there. Sports in general. Now it's completely different in Israel. You know, you walk in Tel Aviv on the beach area, everyone is doing sport. Like if you are not doing it, you are the outsider. So it's just a completely different generation today.
How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel like very good because I was part of the other generation where it wasn't, you know, it wasn't common, and so seeing that whole different, it just feels good. Feels good.
Almost like a pioneer, being one of the first to be able to do that.
Being a pioneer, completely. And for me, I'm like, I would say even a pioneer in Muay Thai in Israel. You know, I'm a 4-time world champion, 4-time European champion, that's unprecedented in Israel. So in the history of Israel.
Because we're going to talk about Muay Thai in Israel. What was it like? Because you don't hear a lot about Muay Thai in Israel. You hear a lot Brazil and South America, other South American countries. What was it like for you to get that training in Israel and then excelling and being able to compete worldwide against others?
I think that my success wasn't only because I'm stubborn and I have strong will and I'm very focused. Yes, that comes into play. But it was also because of the coach, Benny Cogan, that he himself put himself out there to be the best coach that he can be. And he's one of the top coaches, I believe, in the world for Muay Thai. Yes, they're also the Thai national team coaches. But he, you know, just like me as an athlete, he as a coach was stubborn and had strong will, and his personality brought him to be where he was. And the combination between us both, it wasn't only me, by the way, that he was able to bring to 4 European championships and 4 world championships. By the way, it's only Muay Thai. I'm talking about also kickboxing, where I was a world champion. He had Itai Gilshon, he had Ili Agrad, many gold medalists, silver medalists. So he has over 20-something gold medals, not only for me.
You mentioned kickboxing. So what was it like for you to compete in kickboxing and to do that sport and also Muay Thai? Because they are two different sports.
100%, they're two different sports. I even almost, I lost a fight in kickboxing because of that, I think. Some say yes, some say no. So one, it was because I was already a world champion in Muay Thai, and I feel like the referees were like kind of like, oh, you're a world champion in Muay Thai, we're going to show you what it's not this.
This isn't Muay Thai, right?
Yeah. So I kind of, oops.
That's all right.
Maybe we have to move.
Now we'll go through it. It's still enough light, so we're good. Go ahead. So Muay Thai, kickboxing.
So it was 2016, by the way. It was that competition or Muay Thai competition. I went to the Muay Thai. I like the elbows, I like the knees, but something in Israel, they made me go to the kickboxing competition. So like I did like a back fist, and she kind of took a step forward, and it looked like an elbow back, you know, a spinning elbow. And so the referee kind of stopped, and then like took down points, and that was towards the end. And the way they make the points is very different compared to Muay Thai. So yeah, you have to. It's the way you train and how you approach the fight. So it's different, and you have to make that switch in your head, not to make certain mistakes like that.
Lesson learned. You learn quickly from that.
Yeah.
Anytime you have a rare defeat, you come back so much stronger. So for you then, when you succeed in kickboxing, how did that make you feel? And was it the same type of feeling as succeeding in Muay Thai?
So my first success, I would say, in the big ring and in kickboxing was in 2015. It was right after I finished my army service. So kind of there was something that was relief, you know, emotionally and physically, not having to go to the base all the time. And so once I finished my army service, I had that relief and more time also and energy into training. And that was when I became the world champion in kickboxing in Waco, and I beat Helena Moratova. She was a 6-time world champion as well. By the way, I beat her, I think, a couple months beforehand. But you know, for me, it was like, okay, maybe that was a fluke. I don't know. So now in the world championship, that was like the real deal. So it was a big opening for me.
What is that moment like mentally when you're in competition against someone like that and then you beat that person?
You know that you did everything right in the training and that the strategy was right, and so much confidence in your coach. Like, he was right, you know, like, so you continue to listen to what he has to say for future fights.
You mentioned serving for your country. What was that experience like for you, and what did you have to do in your service?
So in my army service, I was a desk
personnel.
Yeah, I had to like make some coffee for the the headquarters and paperwork and just cleaning the office. It was very, basic. Not really, I think.
For
They didn't really need
you,
me
that
there.
doesn't fit you.
No.
That
no,
doesn't fit you at all.
no.
But it was something that needed to be done. It had to be done for your country. How long did
Because
you?
in Israel it's mandatory to go into the army, and so okay, you're gonna be a special athlete. You have to come in for several hours a day and do what you got to do, and go home, go training, whatever it is.
How long did you have to do that for?
I did it for what was it? I think 2 years, but maybe a little less even. I think it was less than 2 years.
And then we talked about your fighting, your sport. You mentioned football.
Yeah.
And what I'm thinking is, do you mean soccer?
No, come on, we're in America.
Well, I know we are, but usually around the world, everywhere else is soccer. So you really wanted to play.
Football,
You said that coming to Miami Beach. That was something you were very interested in, is competing in football.
Right, because it was this whole team effort and all these girls that I really looked up to, and I just admired them. So being part of that group and being on the national team and representing Israel, I'm American citizen as well. I have dual citizenship. But having the Israeli flag on my shoulder, on my chest, wherever it is, it's very important for me. So I just, and again, going back to football, it was my family. So yeah, everything I am today has they have a big part in that.
And you mentioned your mom, obviously, and what was it like for you to get involved in not all these different sports, but especially Muay Thai, and doing that, and with her encouragement, her support, and being able to have her see you succeed? What is that like for you?
I'm very happy that she has a big part in the success. I wouldn't say there was one thing that she did. It's just over the years, the small things that a mom can give you as a kid. First of all, she's the one that exposed me to Muay Thai. And so if it wasn't for her, then I wouldn't be here. And when she was also training, she also had a knee injury. And at that time, there wasn't much awareness to insurances. So she could have easily sued Benny, sued the coach. And what if she sued him, right? If she sued him, I wouldn't be here either, because she didn't sue him, there was something in the agreement, like, okay, send Nili to the training for free, or something like that. So there was, some sort of give and take. And, that always goes through her mind and through my mind, like, what if she would have sued him? I wouldn't be here today. What if my parents stayed in the States when I was young and they didn't move to Israel? I probably wouldn't have been here either today.
It's so interesting that each step could have went one way,
Completely.
turn left instead of turning right, yes, and all of our journeys. And when you were living in the States then, where were you living?
I was born in Baltimore. My
Yeah.
mom is from Cleveland, my dad's from upstate New York. And I guess I don't know, my dad's a dentist, so he was working there. And from, Jews and Zionists, so they moved to Israel.
Well, Baltimore, have you been back to Baltimore at all, even for
No.
competition, or no?
No.
Wow, it's such a cool place, the Inner Harbor. There's just like South Florida, a lot of seafood. But Baltimore, I've been to Baltimore a few times, cool town. But I'll say this, you mentioned too, competing in flag football in Miami Beach. About how old were you at that time?
18?
Oh, so you were much older. Do you remember anything per se about Miami Beach, or even about the competition? I know you've had so many different types of competitions and all, but was that like the first time you recall being down in South Florida?
For football, yes. Yes. And everyone after that, they all went to the Caribbeans. And I was like, so, I really wanted to, but I had to head home because I was doing my SATs to study in college. So unfortunately, that did not happen. And in the end, I didn't even use the SATs to get accepted.
That was going to be my next question, though, about college then. Was college something you pursued? Did you go to college?
I did. I studied at IDC in Israel, the interdisciplinary, what is it? Interdisciplinary
College?
College? I
Maybe.
don't remember. It's in Herzliya, and I went there as an athlete. They're very supportive of athletes. They want you. If you're an athlete, they want to recruit you. I studied psychology. I have a BA in psychology. And, you know, as time goes on, that's like a plan B, you know, as time goes on, probably sports psychology is something that interests me.
And that's interesting, 2 parts there. One, you competed in sports in college, yes?
I continued, yes.
So,
even though it was difficult, the learning and the study, I still became a world champion twice or 3 times throughout those 4 years that I was studying.
what sports did you compete in college? Or did you compete for your college?
They really wanted me to compete for them, you know, if it was basketball or in athletics, whatever it was. But every time I had something, it was an injury or it was a competition or it was training camp, something was always up. So I never ended up, you know, competing for them.
And getting that degree in psychology, how do you think that may have helped you in dealing with the successes and some of the challenges?
Being a student gives you another identity. And so when you don't succeed in a certain area or part in your life, you kind of weave over to another and like feel the success over there, you know? You don't feel like that huge failure, I guess you could say. Obviously, I never, in any loss or something like that, or a bad grade in my test, did I ever feel like, oh, a failure, or never, you know, that's not my personality. But when you don't do great, so you kind of like encourage yourself and feel more confident when you invest in another part. So it's just, again, it's 2 different parts of your life, and so you also navigate between them too. I remember going to training in the morning, running, you know, driving to campus for class, going back to training, and going home and studying again. Or the opposite, going to class, going to training. We would play with it, you know, depending on what my classes' hours looked like.
A couple more questions, we'll wrap this up. Thank you so much. So as a young athlete, a young student athlete, were the Olympics in a sport, part of your DNA, part of the aspirations that you had growing up?
You did your homework. One of the big reasons that I stuck with Muay Thai in the beginning, I was in a big dilemma. Okay, should I do Muay Thai or flag football? And in 2012, when the Olympics happened in London, I was like, you know, it just kind of struck me like, oh, I want to be there. You know, it's something I want to do. What's the closest thing? What's going to bring me to there as an athlete right now? And I would say, okay, maybe it's more like boxing, right? So I stuck with Muay Thai, and like maybe that would help me towards boxing or something like that. As time went on, you know, when you compete more and you become more successful. I was winning, and I was also getting funded through the government, through Ayala, like I said. So like that dream of like switching also into boxing, I didn't really like only boxing. So it kind of like faded, and like there were other goals and other opportunities to be successful in the sport that I was taking part in already. So I didn't like pursue, and like they were talking about Muay Thai becoming an Olympic sport. IFMA is part of the IOC. Don't mistake. I believe that in a few years it will be, but not in my prime time. So right now there are other goals.
Well, if it did become that, would that be something you would pursue?
If it became in the Olympics, first of all, the World Games, as far as I'm concerned, it's like the Olympics.
Of course, you got everyone competing, all the best from all around the world.
Exactly, like that's what it is. So it doesn't have, you know, the
Olympic banner over it, but it's
exactly.
still the World Championships.
And in Israel, by the way, every medal from the World Games is considered like an Olympic medal, you know. So I still get that prestige. You know, if it was going to happen in the next year or two, yeah, why not? Of course. Of course, I'm still here. I'm still competing in Muay Thai.
You mentioned mom training. Was mom a Muay Thai fighter? Did she compete?
she was a big athlete also, like, you know, growing up, but because she also grew up in a religious home in Cleveland, so her parents kind of, you know, oh, that competition, I think it was like in ballet or something like that, or figure skating, something like that. It was like on the Sabbath, on Shabbatot.
Yeah.
So you can't really compete on that day. You know, it's like in Judaism, it's like the Sunday. So she wouldn't compete, and that kind of, you know, that stopped her from becoming, I guess, something bigger in the sport. So I guess as any parent that goes through whatever they go through in life, what they didn't receive or they did receive, they kind of throw it back to their kids, better or for worse.
Yes, for better or for worse, pass it on and then see if they want to do it, not want to do it.
There are many parents, you know, that live through their kids in sports, and that's not good either, because the kid doesn't want it. You can't push him to somewhere he doesn't want
The
it.
enjoyment's not there.
Yeah.
And that passion and the heart is not there, so it gets challenging. You, on the other hand, there's plenty of passion in your heart, and there's plenty of just wanting to do this.
My
to be
parents
successful.
never pushed me, you know? It always came from me. Every change, every decision, everything that I did was because of my research that I did, and like my development and growth as an athlete. It just, you know, through me, I was never pushed. Never.
Other family members, your siblings, were they into athletics, into sports, and did they compete at a high level?
I think all my siblings they took part in something. My sister also was in flag football, my older sister. It was funny because we both went at the same time. My mom took her initially, and then I kind of went after her, and the coach wanted me to play, and then I felt bad, like, oh my gosh. But she was okay. She's now just finishing a degree in Tel Chai in Israel for jewelry. I don't have my necklace on me, but it's actually my bag.
Very creative.
Yeah, it's the Star of David with a punching glove inside of it. So she's very, very talented.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's something special to you in so many
Very
different ways,
yes.
meanings. And you mentioned too about what we consider, I guess, the Sabbath. So was that a challenge at all? Did you have to fight on days like that? And was that just something that you had to deal with?
So during my high school years and a few years post high school, I was a bit more observant. And it was like a challenge, but it wasn't like, oh my God, you know, I always bring with me like my little tuna, my tunas and
sandwich.
my sardines. Yeah, because you know when I travel, so there's not always protein available for me. Okay, eggs, but you know sometimes a lot of pork and chicken. I would eat fish, so I would always have with me my cans of tuna. If I get ever, you know, I'll eat bread and stuff like that. And on the Sabbath, you know, when I would have to weigh in, the challenge was being weighed on the Sabbath. So I would ask like a non-Jew to lift me up onto the scale and lift me off. I literally have someone took a video of it one time, in China it was. So, you know, but as time went on, and I think also my lifestyle changed a bit, a little less observant, but it's still part of me and it's still part of my identity.
And now we'll wrap this up with MMA.
Correct.
So now you're at American Top Team. How long have you been here? What made you decide, okay, now it's time for me to test myself in MMA?
I think around when Ronda Rousey became very big and popular on social media, you started looking out, you know, you started just checking things out, and it was a seed planted from then that kind of like, you know, maybe one day, you know, I was still pursuing my Muay Thai and competing, but you were always, you know, looking and watching what was going on. And around, I think it was 2016, I started wrestling a bit, which was also helping me in the Muay Thai clinch for competitions. And that's when it all started. So my coach was also kind of changing his perspective and his approach to it. But he's still, you know, a Muay Thai trainer, so that's why we're here. I was here 2 years ago, right before the pandemic hit, which drove me home. I was supposed to stay for a bit longer, but I had to go home. And now, you know, the competition at Birmingham, Alabama was in the States. So we pursued that, we competed there, and now we stayed here, and now I'm here.
It's such an amazing story and an amazing journey. And MMA in Israel, what is that like? Is MMA on any scale there, or was it, I need to come to America for MMA, I need to come to a place like American Top Team?
MMA is growing in Israel. There's even an international, they're part of an international
Federation?
Federation, yes. More thing on the amateur side though. For me as a Muay Thai professional, I can't compete amateur. It's growing. Also females, mostly men. But you know, I need to be here. I need to be here right now. But to say that it's, not to say that it's high level, that wouldn't be correct. There is level there. From the jiu-jitsu and the wrestling as well.
What made you decide American Top Team?
So I have a jiu-jitsu coach in Israel named Gabriel Kitobe. He's a Brazilian Jew, and he trains, by the way, the judo team in Israel because they changed the whole rules on the ground game, so they can do extra things there. So he's teaching them. So I've been working like one-on-one with him, and we told him that we're coming to Florida, and he said, "Oh, you guys have to go to ATT." So we came here, and they welcomed me very nicely. He has many friends, and the coaches and the competitors as well.
What have you thought about the coaches and the fighters here?
Amazing, you know, they're very welcoming. Everyone's very polite, you know, saying hello all the time, and you know, you have to obviously make friends, but it's not easy. But amazing.
They're welcoming, but they're also very, very driven and very good, which fits into your DNA, I would think.
Yes.
To be around athletes like that.
Being around athletes, especially women that are at the top level, I've never experienced that before. You know, suddenly, I would say also I'm not the shark in the ocean, and I'm swimming around with them, and that's amazing for me because it's good for my my mental game as well, and for my learning.
Is that something too, part of the learning and part of the challenges too? Because now you're in a training center with so many other women who are very good and very competitive. Because you said, like, in the past that really wasn't, you were training with a lot of men too.
I was only training with the men and the boys all the time, and it was good because, you know, physically sometimes they were stronger, and also that challenge of like, oh, I just took down a boy or whatever it was. So yeah, it's a big challenge, and here suddenly all the girls are stronger, are much more, they have different set of skills, so it's fun also to learn from them and to be part of that.
And lastly, what now are the career goals for you?
So my career goal is to make it to the UFC and to fight Valentina Shevchenko, which we fought in Muay Thai, by the way.
Oh, how did that go?
It was her last competition in Muay Thai, and I lost. It was at the beginning of my career, and so I want to make that rematch, you know, and I think it'll make a big story. But that's the long term, and the short term would be, you know, to make my MMA debut and obviously still compete in Muay Thai if it's possible from a contract perspective. Why not? Of course, I'm still here.
Yes, you are still here, and you're still taking names. Going a little Elton John here. Oh, all right. So now, I was just going to wrap this up, but now I have to ask you. So, what is your go-to music? What do you like to listen to?
That's every one of it. Michael Jackson.
Because you got to have music for your ring entrance. For MMA, when you come out of the ring entrance, you have to have the music.
It's Girl on Fire
by
Alicia Keys. Not hers though, it's like more an acoustic one. But that's the nickname, Girl on Fire.
Yes!
So you can write that on your...
Yes, I can!
Yes.
Thank you so much for the time. It was really a pleasure. Enjoyed this very much, and all the best.
Thank you very much.